Hi, my name is Maddie Bell, and today I'm going to be talking about the theme of identity in relation to the New York Times article Choose Your Own Identity by Bonnie Twissy, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. Um, so this is my third media text, and the reason I decided on this one out of the five we had originally chosen, we had to narrow it down to three, is kind of because of the interesting twist that Bonnie Twissy takes on identity, and it's like nothing I had ever thought about before. Obviously, I had thought about how culture goes into your identity and how, you know, your school culture, your immediate family culture, what you celebrate, would probably go into how you define yourself and just your identity as a whole. But I never thought about it in this specific way, and I'm really excited to analyze it. I just have my notes right here, so I may be looking over here at some points, but that's just to make sure I stay on track. Excuse me. So, basically, the article starts off with Bonnie Twissy explaining her family. So, she's Chinese American and she's married to a just American man. She just describes him as white. And they have a son together, and I believe he's about 5 years old, she said, at the time anyway. And I guess they were talking about race at some point, and he said, you're Chinese. I'm not. I think he may have thought of himself as just American or whatever, but he was pretty sure, he was set in his ways, he's not Chinese. So, kind of brought her into the ideas, I guess, about how if you have different backgrounds, you shouldn't have to identify specifically with one of them, or all of them, or them together at the same time. Yeah, that's kind of how the article goes. So one example she used is her side of the family was having a party where Chinese celebrations and the culture was going to be exposed to her son, and it was going to be embraced. And at that point, he may feel more Chinese than American because he got to learn more about the culture. It's being celebrated by people who embrace the culture. He may feel more directly related to that culture at that time. That does not mean that he always has to feel more Chinese, and if that makes sense. Another thing that kind of makes sense for him to feel more American than Chinese is the fact that he lives in America and he only visits Hong Kong, and to see his family he has to travel a long way. So he may not feel that he is Chinese because he doesn't have to be in the same place as them. And that's kind of one idea, but if overall, you shouldn't have to conform to your backgrounds. It doesn't matter the circumstances. You can choose to be whatever you want to be. It actually got me thinking about my background and how I related to the article, because I wanted to have some connection, kind of make sense of it for myself. So basically, how my background goes is my great-grandmother lived in Ireland, and my grandma, I guess, visited there a bit because she was from there, but my great-grandmother was born in 1914, so she came to Canada when it was just becoming a country, they were just figuring stuff out. She has some really interesting stories because she was around at such an interesting time in our history. But anyways, I don't feel Irish. I don't conform myself to being Irish and accepting that kind of culture because I was never really exposed to it, I guess. I just kind of identify myself as a whole as Canadian. I identify as being nice, and worldwide we're seen as just this picture, and I relate to being Canadian because my mom grew up here, her mom pretty much grew up here, I grew up here, my dad's side of the family grew up here. It just kind of makes sense for me to conform to Canadian nationality, and I don't consider myself Irish whatsoever. But that doesn't mean that I don't have to erase being Irish from my background. I can accept that culture and I can embrace it if I choose, because we're all a little racial fluid. We can choose to be whichever background we want at a time, and I think that that's just kind of a part of living. But anyways, the the thesis statement I chose for this article is a question. It directly relates to the whole article, and eventually I want to answer this question. Does race define your identity? When I said eventually, I have an answer. I think yes, but not everybody's going to agree, and there are a lot of questions that I needed to answer before I could decide that yes, it does go into your identity. Actually, yeah, I had to do some research. I had to think about it. So it's something that you might want to think about for yourself. Do you think that race defines your identity? Do you think it defines other people's identity? Why would it define one over the other? You know, just kind of some things to think about. So, Bonnie to C made a statement that left me in a loophole of wonder. Racial identity can be fluid, and yes, I now know that it can, but when I first acknowledged that culture and your race somewhat defined your identity, I didn't also include my thoughts on how all that makes sense. I can't be categorized into just the section white, because my background may be far more diverse than this. But is it something I would ridicule someone for? No. However, someone from a distinctly different background may feel the urge to correct people with the assumption that they are just one thing, or from one background. This kind of brings us into the path of fitting people into boxes or categories, because that's what society likes to do. For example, black, white, Chinese. List goes on and on, obviously, but let's just say those are the three main categories. Someone who is Chinese, maybe from Korea, they could just be from Japan, the list goes on and on. They could be from anywhere, so why do we have to fit them into one specific category just based on their looks? For example, Bonnie to C's son, he gets asked apparently all the time, is he Croatian, Italian? He always says, no, I'm American. But just because someone looks a certain way doesn't mean we have to force ourselves to put them into a category or a placement of where they're from because of their looks. Oh, if they look like this, then it must be from here. No, our world is so diverse now, and everybody's just from everywhere, so we can't make those kind of assumptions, and I think that it's just safer that we just ask rather than try to fit people into those categories. So that's kind of another part of the fluidity of race and how all that works is, should we fit people into categories? Should you be fit into a category based on your race? Just because you celebrate a racial or an ethnic event, does that mean that you're part of that culture? Maybe not. Maybe you're just part of the family. Like, I'm sure Bonnie to C's husband, he may not celebrate the Chinese events that they do, but I'm sure he'd attend, stuff like that. So should people have the free will to be one piece of their background that they choose, or should they learn to accept all of them? This article taught me that people can feel more directly related to one part of their biracial background because of what surrounds them. For example, to C's son, it lives in America and only visits Hong Kong. I said that before, but of course he's going to better understand the American culture and how his father's culture kind of relates to him better because he gets to live that every day. And once he's done visiting Hong Kong, he goes back to America, where his home is. So that might go into how people define their identity and choose their cultural background in a way. It's ultimately his decision, her son's decision, what he wants to be. And I made an example, like a kind of connection, which I'm not sure if it works anymore because I did some more research, but I'm still gonna say it. It's like earning a dual citizenship. So let's say you're Cuban and you earned a Canadian citizenship. That you can celebrate both cultures. You can tell people that you are Canadian and Cuban. You can do whatever you want with that because you earned it. You learned about the culture. You accepted it. You want to be a part of it, and that makes sense. I don't know. There's a lot of questions that come along with that, like if you've never experienced the culture, can you still embrace it? Of course you can. I think, And I don't know, it's kind of a personal decision. It's kind of up to the person what they decide to do with that information. So, if it's being celebrated, you may choose to embrace it. If not, maybe hard to accept it is kind of the point that I was trying to make. But anyways, in conclusion, the questions on racial categorizing is wrong. And however long your list of backgrounds are, you ultimately have the decision to choose what you want to be, what you want to identify with. Maybe a big decision, for some, but it may just come naturally to others, like to see sun. It's just something he's always known. So however you feel as a person, maybe time to ask yourself, how do you feel culturally? Thank you.